Starstruck.
Mr. Ford, the efficiency reports for the day.
Excellent. Thank you. All right, everything looks to be in working order. Let's keep up the good work.
Yes, sir. Well. now I'm overthinking it, I guess. Well. Welcome back to Joyride. I am Jared Brandon-Flande, and
I am Adam Mendenhall.
And this is the podcast where we talk about all things transportation and adventure. And we're back. How you doing, Adam?
I'm doing well. How about yourself?
Doing pretty good here. And actually, I'm doing pretty good because I'm kind of excited about this episode. So this is going to be a story episode today.
Ooh, excellent.
Now, I have put this... I'll tell you now what it is. This is going to be a Model T-centric one, all right?
Okay.
And I've put this episode on the back burner basically since this show started. Basically since this show was a college radio project, even back then, all right? And, I mean, the story fascinates me, but I was always kind of like, well, you know, it's such an iconic, well-known car. Maybe that'd be a bit repetitive, but when I dug a little deeper, I went, no, there is so many facts you can go into this. And the other reasoning, too, is if you go back to some of our previous episodes, like the pedestrian one, you might notice that the Model T pops in as a little supporting character in places in some of those back catalog episodes. And basically, as X made Y happen because of the Model T. This happened because the Model T came into existence. So I went, okay, I think it's time now to cover this topic. So that's what we're going to do.
Excellent. Yeah, there's a lot of connectivity there with that particular model.
I'd like to point out, too, that this is not a Henry Ford biography. We might get into that at a later date. So there is bits and pieces of Henry Ford's life that are mentioned here, but I just kind of, go into a synopsis of it briefly because the main focus here is the car, the Model T. So
excellent. Okay.
Just want to explain that real quick. So this one is entitled Brave New World, the Ford Model T.
Here we go.
Okay. Many popular cars have been produced since the dawn of the automotive age, but only an exclusive few reach the status of a blockbuster car, and arguably the most famous blockbuster car is the Ford Model T. In the early 20th century, the world was a much different place. The average person at that time did not travel further than 50 miles from where they were born in their entire lifetime.
Wow, in their entire lifetime.
On average.
On average, but yeah, that puts it in perspective.
So what city were you born, for example?
Good old McMinnville, Oregon, actually.
Oh, you were born in the Walgreens. That's right.
That's right.
The hospital is where a Walgreens. That's some local humor. So
yes, the haunted Walgreens that I always tell people. Yeah,
it's not literally a Walgreens.
Yeah.
It's a Walgreens where the hospital used to be.
Same portion of land, where that hospital sat. But yeah, nonetheless.
Okay, so you never go beyond McMinnville, Newburgh, or Salem in your entire life up to now.
Oh,
I mean, if you lived in this time period.
Yes, if I lived in that time period, that would be correct. Yeah, that'd be the farthest that I would get.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, imagine that probably would limited some of your romantic partnerships as well. That's probably why in the old days, if you dug a little deeper, their cousin was a little closer than you didn't realize.
Sometimes those little hay seeds didn't float too far in the fields, put it that way.
Put it that way, exactly. So the average person at that time did not travel further than 50 miles from where they were born in their entire lifetime. The automobile would forever change this. Not only did it allow people to travel further than ever before on their own with their own private mode of transportation, it also changed the personal lives of everyone in the world. A 1920s essayist had this to say regarding this abrupt shift. Quote, "The automobile changed our dress, manners, vocation habits, the shape of our cities, and positions of intercourse." Now, when I first heard this, I had to go back and check this because this isn't a 2020s essayist. This is a 1920s essayist.
Yeah, the context. What are they getting at there?
So, the automobile only became a commonplace possession in the 1920s, however. Self-moving vehicles started in the 18th century, had been powered by steam, and even electric vehicles were being pioneered in the first half of or parts of the 19th century. Of course, if you are interested in that, by all means, go check out our electric cars episode.
Absolutely. That covers it well.
The first gasoline car is generally considered to be the Benz Patent-Motorwagen, which started roaming the streets of Germany in 1885. Once again, if you want to learn more about that, we have a back catalog episode. So,
again, excellent choices, all those back catalog episodes.
Whether they are powered by steam, electricity, or petroleum, cars were not a common sight in the early 20th century and were predominantly curiosities for the rich. So not for the commoners, as you'd say. And a lot of people, since they're rich, a lot of people didn't drive their own cars either. They're usually always chauffeur-driven.
Very true. The people that could afford that could also afford that service.
So the car owner at that time was very disconnected from the concept of owning an automobile in a lot of ways. Mm-hmm. Okay. So during this period, a young farm boy from Michigan began to explore this world of mechanical contraptions. Henry Ford was born on July 30th, 1863. Even though he grew up on a farm, young Henry loathed farming. He was far more interested in how farm machinery worked than farming itself. Now, this is probably because the machinery did most of the work. So, as a youth, Henry would walk the 9 miles from the Ford family to nearby Dearborn in order to work as a machinist.
Wow.
Yeah. That's a commute.
Oh yeah, the foot commute back then, and it's where all these stories come from. You know? Yeah,
up the hill,
in the snow. Yep.
On that note, I don't want to get widely off topic, but I have one of those old school 1920s Underwood typewriters.
Oh, cool.
The thing weighs a ton. It belonged to my grandfather, and he would actually carry that thing to school. Oh my God. So I was like, okay, maybe they're not full of so much crap after all.
No, yeah, you think about that.
In some ways.
The weight of a laptop or a tablet compared to that, equivalent of the day.
So, he would work for various machine shops and manufacturers, and with time would become an excellent machinist. Henry would spend most of his 20s doing this, but arguably one of the most famous men in the world had decided to expand his operations to the Detroit area. This man was Thomas Alva Edison. By the 1800s, Thomas Edison, one of the main figures behind electrifying the world, along with many other innovations, including such things as the gramophone. Henry idolized Thomas Edison. He knew everything about his work and in many ways wanted to reach the same level of achievement Edison had.
Whoa, that's ambitious.
Yeah, and mind you, today's, I'm sure as you know, today's retrospective view at Edison's much different than it was back then.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
So, with this in mind, Henry eventually became an employee of the Edison Illuminating Company, and by 31, he was the operations chief engineer, even though he had hardly any formal education.
Wow, talk about fast track.
And back then, you could just do that too. It's like now it's just like, well, let's see here. You're applying at Joe's Burgers. I need to see your master's degree, and you'll be starting at $15. Thank you.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, putting that degree to work.
Yeah, that's what they want now. Aside from electricity, the other main topic of discussion during the Gilded Age was the automobile. Some people saw it as a nuisance. Some people saw it as nothing but a toy for the wealthy. Some thought it would be a passing fad.
Passing fad.
And some saw it as the future. During these late 19th century water cooler conversations, Henry was one of the few who thought of it as the future. When he was not working for Edison, Henry would tinker in his own workshop. He realized the car had already been invented, but he also realized nobody for the most part at that time had put any serious thought into building a car that the everyday person could afford. Consequently, he thought this would be an ideal avenue to explore. So he's found a niche. Right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a good niche to find because if you can mass produce this thing,
your market's that much bigger.
And you're creating an entirely new market for that category. Anyway,
especially at that point in time, to say the least.
Yeah. So, after many hours of tinkering in his Dearborn shop, with probably many swear words and hammers thrown, I'm sure you know that feeling.
Oh, yeah, all too well.
Henry eventually decided it was the right time to show his new creation to the world. So, on a hot night during June 4th, 1886, Henry opened the doors of his shop and drove his first car out into the streets of Dearborn. Since most people at that time had rarely ever seen a car, one of Henry's buddies got a head start in front of him to warn the residents of the city that Henry was barreling down the road. This was probably a smart move since the car did not feature any brakes.
Oh, wow. That's an afterthought at this point. Yeah.
The quadricycle, as it was called, can only be described as a small buggy that had 4 bicycle wheels. Despite its basic concept, it was enough to wow the residents of Dearborn, which included the mayor. The mayor and a prominent dentist in the area were some of the earliest individuals to invest in a Ford motor vehicle. Now, like I said, this thing it's a prototype. It's really primitive, but that's kind of its selling point. It's simple, so it's cheaper to make than a big fancy car of this time.
Yeah, it's not going to have all those crazy amenities that people had maybe previously seen. But yeah.
The company that would be formed from the success of the quadricycle was the Detroit Automobile Company and was formed in 1899. The first car to be produced by the Detroit Automobile Company received mixed reviews, however. One review said it looked more like a, quote, horse-drawn delivery wagon without the horse, unquote.
Getting the cart before the horse there, boys.
A lot of these car reviews, they're almost more snarky and humorous than some new ones today. I was noticing this when I was looking at their quotes.
You think of how critical people were back then, especially seeing something like this for the first time.
Alas, the Detroit Automobile Company would be dissolved only after being in business for 2 years.
Wow.
So it was a failed venture. Henry would then form a new car company, which humbly was called the Henry Ford Company. It was formed in 1901, and 1 year later, Henry and the board began to mutually dislike each other, so he decided to leave. It would eventually be acquired by General Motors, and it would be renamed the Cadillac Automobile Company.
Interesting sequence of events.
So for all those, there's that big debate, what's better, a Lincoln or a Cadillac? Well, a Lincoln's a Ford, right?
Yeah.
So that means a Cadillac technically is a Ford descendant.
That's some crazy things to think about there.
Yeah, so there's some Cadillac guy is very mad at me right now.
Yes. Yeah,
sorry.
Too many facts there.
Yeah. Well, we gloss over that. We don't talk about that. In that same year, he unveiled his latest automobile, the first Ford Model A. This is not the one you're thinking, okay?
Okay.
The first buyer likely was a wealthy dentist from Chicago. It's always a dentist.
Yeah, I'm in dentist back
It's
then.
always, it still is. Like, there's so many, like, film directors or anyone that's starting a business, they always get, like, starting money from dentists.
It's funny how that works out.
Yeah.
You know?
Not doctors, dentists specifically.
Coincidentally, it's somehow a dentist.
Yeah. I mean, medical doctors. I realize dentists are doctors too. Okay, I want to clarify that. Okay.
That's another argument for another comedic sketch at another time. Yeah. I think Seinfeld covered that greatly.
I'm sure. Yeah. Okay. The new model managed to make Henry Ford his first profit in the car business. He's been at this a while, mind you, okay? But higher powers were not as impressed. The Association of Licensed Automobile Manufacturers, also known as ALUM, basically owned the patent to the automobile in the United States.
Oh, wow.
So one entity owned the patent. Henry applied for ALUM approval in 1903, but was denied. Part of the reason was Henry already had 2 failed business ventures. So what did he do? He continued to build his cars anyway. Now, what I've researched here, what ALUM would do, since they basically own the idea to the car as we think of it, and so if you didn't get approval from them, they were a cartel, no pun intended, they would sue you if you did it without their approval. So Henry's just going, to the hell with you, I'm going to do it anyway. So Henry, despite 2 setbacks, was not deterred. In 1903, he challenged the most famous race driver in the United States, Alexander Winton, who, mind you, was an ALUM member.
Of course.
Yep. There was one problem. Henry had never been in a car race before.
First time for everything.
Despite this minor detail, Henry won the race against Winton's fancy race car, and Henry was only armed with his humble car for the everyman.
Wow.
Mr. Ford would use this clout to gather investors to start his new car operation, the Ford Motor Company.
Here we go.
Which started in 1903. So he had failed multiple times before the Ford Motor Company that we know of, that exists now, finally got going. Well, I guess persistence is a method. So,
yep, and it came to fruition finally.
Yeah. Now, since the days of the quadricycle, Henry continued to perfect his creations, and with every new improvement, he made his way through the alphabet. So this went from the Model A, and eventually to the Model N, which at one point was the best-selling car in the country.
The Model N.
The Model N. They didn't take. Well, there's not a lot of cars being sold, so that wasn't really
sure.
But okay, cool. With time and with multiple new improvements, the Ford Motor Company began to sell a car called the Model T. Yeah. It was additionally designed by Claude Harold Willis, Joseph A. Gallum, and Eugene Farkas. I wonder if this is the father to Scott. I don't know. I'm assuming it's spelled how you say it. So, Farkas. Okay. On September 27th, 1908, the first Model T rolled out of the Ford Piquette Avenue plant in Detroit. So, in 1908, the average car cost about $2,000, or about $60,000 in today's money. That's an average. You can get more expensive, but you're not even going to get close to touching a car unless you're dropping $60,000 for the most part at this time.
Mm-hmm.
So the 1909 model year Model T initially sold for $825, or $24,880 in today's money.
Wow.
So he's over half the average price.
Game changer.
Yeah. Even though the T was cheaper than most of its competition, the T still had to share the marketplace with over 2,200 other manufacturers at that time.
There was that many?
There was apparently that many. You know,
wow.
we talk about the big three, but yeah,
sure.
So one of the big three was in competition with 2,200 others at one point.
Yeah, that makes you think about things.
And a lot of them had to have been built in garages or something. I don't.
Sure, but enough that they were their own brand.
Yeah. And let's see, and it managed to do this with some impressive performance figures. So, the Model T may have not been an original idea, but it was a practical one. It featured a 4-cylinder engine that produced 20 horsepower and could achieve a top speed of 45 miles per hour or 72 kilometers per hour.
Wow.
Now, you could make fun of that, but like the guy that helped, created this thing had to walk 9 miles to get a machinist job. So,
to get a machinist job.
So getting up to 45 is a vast improvement.
It is quite a step up
compared to hopping on your Lamborghinis. So, I thought this was interesting. I think I've mentioned this in one of our other episodes too. It was also one of the first automobiles to standardize putting the steering wheel on the left side of the car.
Oh, yes. Yep, that's
now,
right.
if you want to know all about that, once again, go to our Dog and H episode. Okay, so, and yes, you could have it in any color as long as it was black.
Oh, his famous words.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Initially it only came in black. And I think about this, but so they eventually would make lots of them. They're all black. I didn't find a story. I tried digging, but somebody had to have got into a Model T, drove it home, and then realized it wasn't their car. That had to have happened.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there was lots of different cab options, I believe, on those. But yeah, just the commonplace parking lot. It had to have happened, right? At one point or another.
Honey?
I don't think this is ours.
I can even see it where, they came back home and there was maybe some ladies' lingerie in the back. That he's, of course, swearing it's not him. And of course, she probably doesn't believe it.
Oh, yeah.
Until they find out they got the wrong car.
There's another, no doubt, a scenario like that took place, and how humorous that would be.
At first, Ford was only producing 5 cars a day, but after a while, they moved that number up to 15 cars per day. They're essentially being built by hand, for the most part, by a series of workers. Allen would eventually sue Henry Ford for building cars without patent approval. Ford thought the idea of anyone owning the patent of the automobile was ridiculous. After all, anyone could build a wagon or even a ship without any form of cartel approval. So she's not wrong, at least in this case.
Mm-hmm.
So Ford battled Allen in court for years. In 1909, the courts ruled in favor of Allen initially, but it was later overturned in Ford's favor in 1911. Allen finally accepted they had lost the battle and did not contest the ruling. Henry was now free to take over the world. There was nothing in his way now. Henry Ford was not satisfied with just producing a handful of cars per day. He wanted everyone in the United States and even the world to own a Ford motor car.
There's a vision. Wow.
In the long run, his wish would come true in many ways. The demand for the Model T became so great, efficiency did not become an obsession for Henry Ford, but a religion. He knew his factories simply had to crank out more cars. With time, he came to a solution, and it was not inspired by cars, but by slaughterhouses.
Oh, interesting.
Slaughterhouses, or abattoirs, if you're cultured, were some of the first business entities to use production methods where only one person did one job at a time. So this was done by moving large animals through an abattoir via mechanized systems that moved the beef from one point to another. Henry thought that if you could disassemble a cow this way, why couldn't you assemble a car in the same fashion? So the first place the Ford Motor Company experimented with this concept was with the magnetos that were needed to generate the electricity a Model T required. Instead of having just one worker build an entire magneto, why not have a series of workers quickly do one part of the magneto assembly process, then move it down a line to another worker to add more components, and then so on and so on. This approach greatly increased the production of Ford magnetos, and so Henry Ford and the rest of his suits came to the conclusion they should use the same approach to build an entire Model T. Thus, the modern assembly line process was born.
Oh, here we go.
The assembly line process did 2 things. Firstly, it increased the amount of cars that could be produced. So, let me put this in perspective for you, all right? Build time dropped from 12 hours per car to only 15 minutes per car.
That's incredible.
Secondly, it also lowered the price of the car. By 1922, the Model T had dropped from $825 per unit to only $319, or about $5,800 in today's money.
Oh, I didn't realize there was that much of a drop. That is huge.
So, yeah, brand new car, $4,000 to $6,000.
It's hard to today to compare that. It's like buying what used to be like buying a new little Kia or something like the entry-level model.
Yeah. At one point, over 2 million Model Ts were built in a single year. Perfect time. We got that gulp. The T is also considered to be one of the first world cars since it was simultaneously being built in factories all over the world, including the massive River Rouge complex in Michigan. So that's a whole story on itself. But then, they're building them in other countries like, UK and Ireland and that case, and lots of other places too. So the assembly line was not without its critics, however. Many new workers quit within a few days because they felt the work was unbearable, which it was. That reminds me of one time I worked for I won't mention by name, a certain package handler.
I think I know which one you're talking about. Yeah.
Okay. The most famous man in the world at the time, Charlie Chaplin, even had his own 2 cents about the new manufacturing process. Chaplin was born into poverty and thus saw the assembly line as nothing more than modern slave labor, which it kind of is. As a result, he harshly criticized it in his 1936 film Modern Times, where his tramp persona plays a factory laborer that is comically pushed beyond what should be expected of honest workers.
Oh, interesting criticism of the day. Yep.
It was a comedy, but it had a lot of biting political satire.
Sure, taking some nice jabs. At current events.
And you probably see bits of that. That's that where he's sitting at that machine that's feeding him lunch as he's being forced to keep working, kind of crap like that. So, to offset this bad publicity and to decrease the problem of worker turnaround, Mr. Ford suggested they double the daily wage of all workers to $5 a day. Now, most people know this, and it wasn't necessary. A lot of people to this day still think it was an altruistic move, which it really wasn't. So despite the boardroom pushback, mind you, his board was horrified by this. You're doubling the wage.
Oh, the overhead.
Yeah, how is this going? They're like, how is this going to fix our problem? Okay, so despite the boardroom pushback, his plot worked. So this is what happened. Even though it was the same terrible work, men flocked to the gates of Ford factories because that kind of money was simply too much to pass up. Worker turnaround would eventually decline, which saved the company money in the long run. Oh. So they were every time people would quit, they'd have to bring in new ones and have them be retrained, which lost time and took money. So even though he's doubled their wage without having to do all that retraining constantly, they're saving money in the long run.
Yep, retention.
Even though the company at this time only produced this one model, it came in many forms and shapes. The 2-seat runabout model, for example, featured an exposed passenger seat that was bolted behind the main double seat.
Oh.
It was referred to as the mother-in-law seat.
Oh, that's wow!
Different time.
Yeah, different time. Slang of the day. Oh, that's funny.
It's like, if your mother-in-law just rides my ass for a time, you know where she's sitting, that back seat, or your mother, not your mother-in-law. Other Model Ts were also offered as early pickup trucks. So you see those ones that had beds in the back, And some models could even be converted with a larger wheel system that made it ideal for farm work, much like a tractor.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
So with all these different options, Henry Ford himself referred to the T as the universal car.
Truly was.
Yep. Much like the assembly line, the Model T itself was not without its critics. Even though it was in many ways the first car the average family could afford, this did not necessarily mean it was a well-built car. Nicknames for the car, including the Tin Lizzie or the Flivver. I'm not sure if that's old slang, but that was another one for something else. But Tin Lizzie and Flivver jokes were about as common as the car itself. Some of them go like this, quote, "Can I sell you a speedometer? I don't use one. When my Ford is running 5 miles an hour, the fender rattles, 12 miles an hour, my teeth rattle, and 15 miles, the transmission drops out."
I've got all the parameters I need. Wow.
Jokes like these did not deter Henry Ford. In fact, he loved them. He was known to say that even though He is even known to say that he even thought they helped sell Ford cars,
Oh, be dang.
which they most likely did. Even though they're making fun of it, it's free advertising.
Excellent point.
Yeah.
It truly was. Yeah, you were still getting advertising there.
So, with sales booming, Mr. Ford even made the surprising offer of a $50 rebate at one point to each potential Ford owner if the company was able to sell over 300,000 Ts within the year.
Oh.
So he's making a promise. If we sell 300,000 Ts, then everyone gets a $50 rebate on their car, which is a good chunk of change back then.
Oh, yeah, back then. That's a big chunk.
The total ended up being 308,218 vehicles. And the company had to pay out almost $15.5 million in rebates.
Wow.
It was considered to be one of the first profit-sharing schemes within the American capitalist system. Once again, it was not entirely altruistic, however, since the scheme managed to greatly increase the sales of cars in the long run for the Ford Motor Company.
Oh.
Any way he can nickel and dime, he's nickeling and diming.
He's taking advantage to further the cause.
Yeah. The Tin Lizzie was also not an easy car to operate. There were 3 pedals like in modern cars today. Okay, everyone look down at your feet right now if you're not driving. Okay. If you're safely sitting somewhere, okay. The left pedal was the clutch like today, but the middle was the reverse pedal.
Well, that's different.
And the right pedal was the brake. Okay. Now, when you look up here towards your steering wheel, okay, it also featured 3 gears, a low, a high, and reverse. Okay, which had to be engaged via the dual shift lever / handbrake. It was both built into one. Okay.
Wow.
The timing and throttle were levers on the steering column located to the left and the right of the wheel, respectively. So you control the timing chain to the left with this lever here, and then you control the throttle with the lever to the right.
Oh, that's different.
It also did not like to start on cold days. This fortunately was easily fixed with homemade antifreeze that was usually made from whiskey and water.
Oh.
You had to be desperate to get to somewhere, I assume, back then. It was like, just pour it in. Just
Sure.
We're late.
Like vinegar, yet another home recipe and use for whiskey.
The T additionally did not like to go up hills. The fuel tank, which was, quote, safely underneath the front passenger seat, did not have a pump, but instead fed fuel to the carburetor via gravity.
Oh.
This meant that a Model T owner had to travel up a hill backwards in order to get fuel to the engine so it would not sputter and stall on the way up.
Oh, that's interesting. Didn't know that.
Now, I had heard this before, and I had heard it from a horse's mouth, because one of my grandfathers, when his health was fading, he was getting ready to pass. He was up there. He was well into his 90s. And I was, a teenage kid at the time. It's like, what is it? I figured, I better talk to him a little bit because, he may not be around for much longer. But what does a teenage boy talk about with a 90-year-old man? Mm-hmm. I didn't really know. So, fortunately, there was a show that had a Model T playing because he loved all that History Channel stuff. And I said, I kind of made it as a joke. Do you remember those, Grandpa? He goes, I do. But he goes, yes, they were awful. The horse was more reliable. I went, this guy's been around a long time.
Oh, man.
And he told that story. He said, yeah, you had to drive up a hill backwards because the fuel wouldn't run to the engines.
You think about somebody like him that lived through that era and transition, that they go, hey, what's trusted and tried and true, right? Just get the horse. It's easier than that damn contraption out there. Yeah.
So that was trippy, obviously. Also, if you wanted to start the car, you had to get out and start it via the crank with the chance of it catching and breaking your wrist. We've talked about this before. Until an electric start option became available by 1917.
Wow.
So there was a key in a similar fashion to how we do it now. So despite the, quote, what you see is what you get approach of the Ford Motor Company, There were plenty of aftermarket options for the Tin Lizzie, including things such as electric headlights and speedometers. Like, speedometers, not standard equipment. Mail order Model T accessories were known to have totaled over 5,000 items at one point in time.
Wow, 5,000.
Yeah. So it's like, remember when the iPad came out and there was all these third-party components that you could buy for it? It was essentially the same thing, but with this car here. Despite these offerings, by the mid-1920s, the model was beginning to lose its luster to most consumers, and even for most of the executives at the Ford company. The notable exception of one executive, Henry Ford.
Henry Ford.
Yeah. Now, mind you, General Motors is coming on, so there's more stiffer competition at this point. They're building more refined cars at this point.
The market's changing.
Yeah, the market's changing. Even though the Model T was becoming antiquated in the minds of many, this was not the case for Mr. Ford. He simply thought that T was, quote, the perfect car.
And you don't need to fix perfection.
You don't need to be. None of you know what you're talking about. Despite pleading from the other Ford execs and even from Henry's friendly son, Edsel, the elder Ford initially did not budge. The company's market share had to drop by 50% in order for the younger Ford to finally convince the senior Ford it was time for a new model. Henry Ford reluctantly joined his son to drive the final Model T off the assembly line on May 26, 1927.
Wow.
Depending upon the source, at least 15 million Model Ts had been built between 1908 and 1927.
You know, I think there's actually some historic footage there that I've seen in the past where it's what you just mentioned, Henry Ford, riding alongside, and they actually have 15th millionth
on the side. That's exactly right. Yep. The new Model A would replace it 1 year later, so that's the more famous one. That's the one you drove at the beginning of A Half-Life of Genius.
That's right. Yep.
Yeah. So, by the way, if you want to see Adam drive a Model A, by the way, check out the documentary film The Half-Life of Genius. Physicist Raymond Schreiber. I believe it's on Freevee at the moment, but it's on the internet. So, or a streaming service. So, okay. So, yeah, the new Ford Model A would replace it 1 year later. So, the Model T was much like its central creator, simple but complicated. It took many years of refining and improvements for it to be the perfect car that sometimes was not so perfect. Even though it had its faults, the Model T was not only revolutionized the automobile industry, it also revolutionized the way people traveled. It really was the first blockbuster car, and in many ways built the world we still live in today.
Wow, and arguably the most important vehicle in automotive history, just because of its impact.
Definitely one of them, and that is the end of our story.
Well, that is some excellent insights, and like you had mentioned earlier, I mean, there's a lot more to be said about Henry Ford as a person, but that was an interesting and excellent take on the car itself.
Yeah, but I read an entire book, on the subject, so you could go into more details. Our episodes run about a half hour, so I do encourage anyone, if you really, really want to dig in, there's plenty of other resources too. You can also to learn even more if you wish. So, with that said, that's not only brings this episode to an end, but this brings Season 6 to an end. We will be back with Season 7. We are currently working on new scripts for that. We also have some new topics and concepts that we'd like to try out on the show as well. So, when the time comes, I hope you join us on another good Joyride.
Absolutely. Looking forward to it myself.
And by all means, once again, we are on Patreon. We appreciate whatever support you can give. Depending upon your podcast app you prefer, we like good likes, or maybe even give us a nice review, preferably a nice one. And by all means, too, check out all our social media in the description box below. So with that said, I think we're going to slow things down here, bring things to a close. So with that said, we'll catch you next time, Adam.
Till next time.
All right, signing out.